My parents asked me to sell my apartment again to save my spoiled younger brother. We need you to do it again. Just one more time, Madison. The words slid through the phone's speaker like oil on ice. Smooth, practiced, slippery. Madison sat motionless in her small kitchen, her fingers wrapped around the warmth of a fresh coffee mug. The bitter scent of roasted beans filled the cramped air of her apartment, clashing with the icy draft seeping through a cracked window. Outside, Boston wore its usual winter scowl, the sky a uniform gray, clouds swollen with indecision. But it wasn't the weather that made her stomach turn. The video call screen flickered to life on her tablet, propped against a stack of unpaid utility bills. Valerie's face emerged first, perfectly composed, lips painted in a soft mauve, hair set in waves that spoke of a salon visit no later than Friday. Behind her, the expensive decor of the family's suburban home gleamed in soft daylight, cold, distant, and immaculately impersonal. Stephen appeared beside her, partially framed as usual. His eyes didn't quite meet the camera. "Tyler's in trouble," Valerie said, her voice trembling just enough to sound unrehearsed. "He borrowed money again. It's serious this time. Loan sharks, Madison. The kind that don't just take things, they take people." Madison blinked slowly. The mug in her hands began to cool. "You know he's not like you," Valerie went on, eyes glossy. "He's never been good with structure, with consequences. But he's your brother. That has to mean something." Madison inhaled sharply. "I already sold my car for him last year. Remember? The one I spent 2 years saving for?" Stephen coughed faintly but said nothing. Valerie's expression didn't waver. "Yes, and we were so proud of how selfless you were. You understood what family means. I took the train for 7 months. I missed client meetings. I've been late to interviews. And now you're asking for my apartment?" Valerie's lips curved. Not quite a smile. Something more polished, more sinister. "You're living alone. You work from home. Isn't that a luxury, really?" Madison's voice caught. "This apartment is all I have." "Exactly," Valerie replied, eyes narrowing just slightly. "So why not give it to family?" A silence fell, one that buzzed, thick with things left unsaid. The coffee in Madison's hands trembled slightly as she set the mug down on the table, not trusting herself to hold it. Stephen finally spoke. "We just want what's best for everyone." "You mean for Tyler?" Madison said. "He's part of everyone," Valerie snapped, then softened. "Look, we wouldn't ask if there was another way." Madison stood up. Her voice, when it came, was thin but steady. "There's always another way. You just refuse to look for it." Valerie sighed, wounded. "You always were so dramatic." "Because being calm never worked with you." A pause. Then coldly, "We'll consider you selfish if you refuse." That did it. The call ended with a single tap. The screen went black. The silence in the apartment returned, deeper now, more final. Madison stood still, her hand resting on the kitchen counter. Her other hand was still around the coffee mug. She didn't notice how hard she was squeezing it until a sharp crack split the air. Porcelain fractured beneath her fingers, a jagged line blooming across the cup's surface. Her chest rose and fell, the tension in her shoulders pressing into her spine. Nothing had changed, and that was the part that hurt most. This is how it starts. Then it never ends. Chloe's voice cut through the soft hum of the coffee shop like a scalpel through gauze. The sentence hung between them, steam rising from mismatched mugs and catching the glow of amber bulbs overhead. Outside, the streets of Boston blurred with rain, headlights dragging slow streaks across the window beside their table. Madison stirred her tea, even though she hadn't added anything to it. Her fingers trembled slightly. She hadn't spoken for almost a full minute, ever since she'd finished recounting the call. Chloe leaned forward. Her dark curls were frizzed from the humidity, her hoodie slightly damp, but her eyes, sharp, unreadable, stayed fixed on Madison. "This happened before, didn't it?" she asked quietly. "No," Madison replied too quickly. Then her hand stopped moving. Her eyes dropped. Yes. Chloe didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Madison knew what she'd see in her best friend's face. Not judgment, just exhaustion. Recognition. Last year, Madison continued, her voice faint, they told me Tyler's car got repossessed, that he couldn't get to work. They said if I really cared, I'd sell mine so he could stay employed. And did he? Chloe asked. I don't know, Madison said. He disappeared for a while. When I called to ask, my mom said not to pry. Chloe's jaw clenched. You know how many times I paid my ex-boyfriend's rent before I realized he wasn't even living there anymore? He was with someone else. I was just the backup plan. Madison glanced up, her eyes wide. This is different. It's family. That's what I told myself, Chloe said, more gently now. She reached out and placed a hand on the table between them. But it's not help if it's expected. That's servitude. The words fell like stones, silent but heavy. Madison felt the tension twist in her chest, her breath catching at the edges. They said Tyler's in trouble, she murmured, that I'm the only one who can fix it. Chloe's gaze didn't waver. Then they're not fixing him. They're breaking you. Madison blinked hard. A storm was gathering behind her eyes, one she didn't want to name. She tried to look away, but Chloe spoke again, softer but sharper. You know Tyler opened a credit card under your name, right? Time stopped. What? Madison's voice cracked. I didn't want to tell you unless I was sure, but I saw the statements. I helped you sort your taxes last April, remember? There was a line from a bank you never used. I thought it was fraud, so I called. They said the card was activated in person. He used your driver's license. Madison felt cold sweep through her body, a slow drip of betrayal that pooled in her gut. You didn't tell me. I wanted to, Chloe said, but I knew you wouldn't believe me, not back then. Madison stood abruptly, the chair legs screeching against the worn tile. Her heart was thudding in her ears. I need to go. Madison, I just need to check something. Rain lashed her coat as she stepped outside, but she barely felt it. The night swallowed her hurried steps, her thoughts louder than the storm. Her apartment door slammed behind her minutes later. She didn't remove her shoes. She didn't turn on the lights. She went straight to the hallway drawer, the one she never used, the one her mother insisted was for safekeeping when she visited last spring. She pulled it open with trembling hands, and there they were, 3 crisp bank statements addressed to her name, but from an account she'd never opened. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud. Madison stared at the bank statements laid out on her desk, the edges curling from the heat of her fingertips. The lamp above her cast a mellow yellow glow across the paper, softening nothing. Her apartment, usually a sanctuary of muted calm, now buzzed with a quiet violence, the sound of truth settling into corners she had ignored for too long. She sat down slowly, pulling her laptop toward her with mechanical precision. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, then typed in the bank's website. Her heart thudded, not fast, but heavy, as if each beat had to force its way past something thick and reluctant. Logan, 2-step verification, security image of a lighthouse. Her name appeared at the top of the screen, Madison Claire Linwood. Beneath it, her familiar checking account balance. Groceries, rent, coffee shops, all familiar. Then, a second tab, another account. Her mouse hovered before she clicked. It opened. The numbers on the screen were alien to her. Thousands of dollars in purchases, boutiques she'd never heard of, jewelry, a cash withdrawal, $400 made at a casino 2 towns over, and a flight booking, one way. She leaned back slowly, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. The room didn't feel like her own anymore. It felt staged, a theater where she'd been cast in a role without her consent. She reached for her phone. The bank's support line played light jazz while she waited. She barely registered it. Thank you for calling Norpoint Bank. How may I assist you? Madison cleared her throat. I I think there's an account in my name that I didn't open. Certainly. Can I have your full name and account number? She gave it. The operator paused. We do show two accounts under your social. The newer one was opened in person about 11 months ago. In person? Yes, ma'am. Using your driver's license and social security number. She closed her eyes. Can you confirm the address associated with the second account? More tapping on a keyboard. Yes. The address is 1546 Elmwood Court. Her mouth went dry. That was Tyler's. She thanked the operator, ended the call, and just sat there. The room was too quiet. The walls suddenly looked thin, like the world beyond them had always been waiting for her to wake up. A dry laugh escaped her lips. Family helps each other, she whispered aloud, mimicking Valerie's polished voice. Then, after a pause that felt like a fracture in time, so do predators. The laugh was gone now, replaced by something hollow. A draft from the cracked window stirred a corner of the rug. Madison didn't move. Her laptop pinged. A new email had arrived. Subject: unusual activity. Detected on account ending in 2398. Body: we have flagged a transaction consistent with potential identity fraud. Please log in to review immediately. Her cursor hovered again, but this time she didn't flinch. You don't need a lawyer, we're family. The words hit the air just as Madison dipped her spoon into the stew. The same beef and carrots she loved as a child. But tonight, even nostalgia tasted thin. The room around her was warm in temperature but cold in tone. The house smelled of cinnamon candles and fabric softener, but the scent couldn't hide the tension stitched into the silence. Across the table, Valerie slid a manila folder forward, the corner grazing Madison's plate. Stephen sat beside her, hands folded, eyes fixed on the tablecloth as if reading secrets in its pattern. It's just a standard property transfer, Valerie said, her voice smooth. Tyler can't get approved alone, and with your name on it, the mortgage gets through. Madison didn't move. Again? She asked quietly. Valerie tilted her head. Don't be dramatic. You said that when I co-signed his lease? When I let him use my credit for the business loan? When he needed a little help with his tuition? And you were always generous, a good sister. Madison looked up. Did you read the contract? There's no need. Tyler's your brother. Stephen shifted in his chair but didn't speak. Madison opened the folder. The first page had her full legal name in bold, directly above the line marked, Transferring Party. Her hand gripped the paper tighter. I want to review this with a lawyer, she said evenly. Valerie blinked. What for? It's a simple formality. If it's so simple, Madison said, then you won't mind me making sure. The front door opened with a thud. Footsteps stumbled across hardwood, and Tyler appeared, eyes glossy, hair uncombed, and the distinct scent of liquor trailing him like a shadow. Hey, sis, he slurred. Thanks for coming. Real big of you. He gave her a crooked smile. It's just a small favor. Madison stared at him, then down at the paper. Her voice, when it came, was calm. I'm not signing anything without a legal review. The table went silent. Valerie's fork clinked against her plate. Her lips flattened. You're letting outsiders come between you and your own blood? She said slowly, coldly. I'm setting boundaries, Madison replied. Valerie pushed her chair back with a sharp screech. Her hands curled around the folder like claws. Then don't bother coming back here. You're not crazy. This is financial abuse. Madison sat across from the woman who had just said those words, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was underwater. The law office was nothing like she expected. No glossy floors or leather chairs, just a small converted brownstone with potted ferns in the windows and the faint scent of fresh coffee. Outside, trees rustled against the glass in the spring breeze. Andrea wore a button-up shirt, sleeves rolled, and her laptop open between them. She tapped her pen against the stack of papers Madison had brought, eyes scanning line by line with quiet intensity. You didn't read every one of these before you signed, did you? Madison shook her head slowly, guilt flushing her cheeks. I trusted them. It was always phrased like an emergency. Andrea nodded without judgment. That's the pattern. They rush you, they dramatize, they guilt you into urgency. And you, being the responsible one, always comply. She paused, flipping to a page near the bottom. This one, the vehicle loan? It's in your name. But he defaulted, and they rolled the balance into a new loan. In your name again. Look here. She pointed, and Madison leaned in. And this one, Andrea continued, tapping another sheet, was a title transfer. Property passed briefly through Tyler before being sold. I'd wager you never saw a cent. Madison stared. They always said it was temporary, that it was just paperwork, that it helped with taxes. It helped someone, Andrea replied dryly. Just not you. A silence stretched between them. They've built this slowly, Andrea said. Not all at once, but drop by drop. It's a long con disguised as familial obligation. That's what makes it so hard to see, and so hard to prosecute. But not impossible. Madison swallowed. What can I do? Andrea closed the folder. We start quietly, freezing assets, requesting financial records. We don't alert them yet. She slid a new document across the table. This is a legal services contract. Once you sign, I represent you. And I promise, they won't know what hit them. Madison reached for the pen. Her hand hovered for a moment as if her old instincts wanted to stop her. But then her grip tightened. She signed. When she looked up, her eyes were sharper than they'd been in years. Let's begin. You can burn a bridge if it only leads to pain. The glow from Madison's laptop bathed the room in a cold blue light. It was past midnight, but sleep had long stopped being part of her routine. Her office, once a place of quiet freelance work and color palettes, now looked like a war room. Multiple browser tabs were open, 2 legal pads full of scribbled dates and account numbers, a folder from Andrea's office cracked wide on the desk. Her fingers moved with sharp precision. First, the Chase Joint Savings Account. Closed. Next, the Huntington checking tied to Tyler's college payments. Closed. Then, the co-signed auto loan. Terminated, with a fee she didn't flinch at. She took a breath. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of her computer and the occasional scratch of her pen. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Freeze everything. Save screenshots. Metadata too if you can. She replied, already halfway there. Just then, a pop-up appeared in the corner of her screen. New credit application submitted. Confirmation required. Her breath caught. She clicked fast, fingers trembling slightly. Another credit line. Under her name, a third, filed minutes ago. She clicked decline, then hit report fraud. Without hesitation, she reached for her phone again. Ethan, she said when he answered, voice low but urgent. He just tried again. Get screenshots. He replied instantly. Timestamp everything. Save it in multiple places. She did. Click, save, upload to cloud, print to PDF, backup to flash drive. This time she wasn't going to be left exposed. She pulled out a fresh document, opened a new Word file. Statement of unauthorized use. Madison C. Linwood. She began typing, each keystroke a steady rhythm. On June 2nd, 2025, a credit application was submitted under my name without consent. She listed account numbers, dates, amounts, locations. Her eyes didn't waver. Her jaw didn't clench. She just documented. Cold. Clear. A tone sounded from her phone. She glanced over. Valerie, don't make us your enemies. The words pulsed on the screen like poison. Madison didn't respond. Not yet. But her finger hovered over save, then send to Andrea. And then, finally, she leaned back, steady, the last coals of old fear turning to ash. Sometimes silence is the loudest strategy. Madison's footsteps echoed softly down the long corridor of the Boston Police Department's civil complaint wing. The air was sharp with disinfectant and resignation. A flickering ceiling bulb buzzed overhead as she approached the desk, the folder Andrea had handed her tucked tightly under one arm. She handed it to the clerk with steady fingers. The woman behind the glass glanced over it, then passed it down a line of trays without a word. 10 minutes later, Officer Grayson emerged. Tall, stiff posture, graying hair at the temples. He didn't smile. "Miss Linwood?" he said. "Yes." He took the folder from the tray, flipped through the pages with quick, practiced eyes. "This is a civil financial complaint. You're claiming unauthorized debt, long-term misuse of personal credit?" "Yes," she said, "and I have documentation to prove it." Andrea stepped in beside her, blazer buttoned, voice crisp. "We've included account histories, signed statements, and precedent." She was coerced, multiple times. Grayson didn't respond right away. Then, "We'll investigate quietly. You'll be contacted if escalation is necessary. Until then, no outreach, no alerts. Do you understand?" Madison nodded. Outside the precinct, Andrea turned toward her. "Now go home," she said. "Smile. Make them think you're folding. That's the only way this works." Madison exhaled slowly. A few hours later, she stood outside her parents' house again. The sky was overcast, like it hadn't decided whether to storm or clear. She knocked twice, calmly. No tension in her shoulders, no anger on her face. A moment later, the door creaked open. Valerie stood there, framed in the glow of the chandelier behind her, lips curved upward, satisfied, maybe even smug. "Finally," she said. "You came to your senses." Nothing tastes more bitter than a forced apology. The dining room glowed under soft yellow lights, every surface gleaming, every dish positioned like a set piece. Valerie had outdone herself. Roast lamb, 2 kinds of salad, the old porcelain plates brought out for special occasions. But the air was stale with something unspoken. Madison sat where she always had, left side of the table next to Stephen, across from Tyler. Her plate was full, untouched. She shifted the fork once, twice, before finally lifting a bite to her mouth. "This reminds me of that Christmas when Tyler burned the turkey," Valerie said lightly, scooping potatoes. "Remember, Maddie? You tried to fix it with soy sauce?" Madison smiled faintly. "Didn't work." Everyone chuckled, except her. Tyler leaned back in his chair, toothpick in hand. "Hey, maybe I'll borrow your apartment for a few weeks. Bet it'll look better with my furniture in it." Madison didn't flinch. She picked up her water glass, took a sip, and turned to Stephen with a calmness so practiced it looked natural. "How's the firm, Dad? Still billing $1,000 an hour to ignore Mom's redecorating plans?" Stephen gave a weak smile. "You know your mother always gets her way." Valerie laughed, but it was sharp at the edges. Madison glanced at the bowl of carrots in front of her, fork tines glinting. She pushed food around her plate, calculated. The real feast was not on the table. "They're watching me," she thought. Every blink, every breath. Halfway through the second course, Stephen cleared his throat. "So," he said casually, "you'll sign this week?" Madison looked up, met his eyes, then turned to Valerie. "I'm getting some documents reviewed." There was silence. Even the cutlery paused. Valerie's hand tightened on her spoon. The silver trembled between her fingers. Her face twitched, just a fraction. But Madison saw it, a crack in the mask. Then, like a curtain falling, Valerie's smile returned. "That's good," she said sweetly. "We all want what's best for each other. Sometimes the ones who watch in silence are the most guilty." The records room smelled like old paper and fluorescent fatigue. Rows of metal filing cabinets stretched like dead-end hallways, and the buzz of the overhead lights hummed with indifference. Madison stood beside Ethan, her hands in her coat pockets, heart pacing just below her ribs. The bank employee, a woman with tired eyes and a careful tone, led them toward a small table tucked behind a partition. We found the documents under the archived co-owned education accounts. You'll have 10 minutes. Ethan flashed his smile, the one he reserved for pretending. Appreciate it. When the woman left, Madison opened the folder. Account number 4, 42-10987. Co-owners, Madison Linwood, Stephen Linwood. She flipped to the transaction logs. Her fingers stopped on one line, dated September 5th, 2014. Withdrawal, $15,000. Authorized by co-owner, Stephen Linwood. Her stomach sank. She remembered that year clearly. The brochure from Yale she folded so many times the edges turned soft. The financial aid package that almost covered it. Almost. And the sudden family meeting where her mother suggested a more reasonable choice. She never saw that money again. I thought, she whispered, I thought the scholarship just wasn't enough. That it was my fault. Ethan leaned over her shoulder. They never told you? No, she said, voice dry. They never had to. I just adjusted. The fluorescent lights flickered. She sat down slowly, running her hand across the paper like it might change under her touch. They never planned to let me succeed, just survive. In her memory, her father's silence at the dinner table came back. Not cruel, not loud, just absent. The kind that made betrayal seem like tradition. Ethan sat across from her, pulling the folder closed. Are you ready to show this in court? Madison looked up and nodded. Justice isn't loud. It's served in silence and certified mail. The Civil Records Office smelled of old paper and determination. The windows were narrow, the light pale. A slow-moving clock ticked above the filing counter, where Andrea stood in her soft blue blouse clutching a manila folder filled with truth. Madison stood beside her, still, like a soldier watching the first weapon drop. The clerk adjusted his glasses, flipped through the documents, and stamped each one with the kind of quiet finality that made you understand power didn't always scream. It's official, he said, sliding the folder into the bin marked Outgoing Certified. He'll be served within 72 hours. Madison reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and snapped a photo of the bin. Not for evidence. For herself. A memory. The exact moment her voice finally became weight on paper. Andrea didn't smile, but her eyes softened. That's your first victory. Madison nodded once. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. As they walked out into the gray winter light, Andrea's voice turned sharper. This will get ugly. People like your mother, they fight with guilt, not logic. Be ready, not everyone plays fair when the mirror cracks. Madison's phone buzzed, a notification from her bank app. Alert. Your checking account was accessed from an unrecognized device. Her breath caught. She opened the app. An IP address from their old house. Her account still intact, but someone tried. She didn't speak, just showed the screen to Andrea. Andrea's mouth tightened. We lock it down. Today. Back home, just as the door clicked shut behind her, the phone rang. Caller ID. Valerie. Madison let it ring once, twice, then pressed accept. Valerie's voice came through, low and trembling. How could you do this to your own brother? If they can't break you in private, they'll shame you in public. The glow of Madison's phone cut through the darkness of her bedroom like a knife. She hadn't turned on the lights after coming home. The silence was enough. But now, the screen buzzed again. A familiar chime she hadn't heard in months. Family group, Linwood Legacy. Her chest tightened. She opened it. Valerie's message filled the screen like a monologue rehearsed for years. As a mother, nothing is more painful than being betrayed by the child you raised. We gave everything. And now she's trying to destroy her own brother. Some people forget where they came from the moment they earn a dime. Shame. Underneath, a string of comments poured in like acid. Uncle Martin. She always was a little cold. Aunt Celeste. Some daughters repay love with lawsuits. Pathetic. Cousin Grace? Did she even think about what this would do to your health, Aunt Val? Every message another thorn. Madison scrolled, eyes flat. Her thumb hovered over the leave button. But then another message popped up. Aunt Celeste. If we could go back in time, maybe this wouldn't happen. Attached, a photo of Madison's birth certificate, like an offering to erase her. She stared at it for a long time, breath shallow. Then, ping. Chloe, private message. You okay? Madison replied with a single emoji. Stone. Unmoving. No words left. She returned to the group, held her finger on the thread, and hit delete. Not just leave. Erase. Then, with hands steadier than she expected, she turned to her bookshelf, reached into the back behind a row of old design books, and pulled out the thin gray binder. The Truth Plan. She placed it on her desk, open to the first tab. This wasn't going to be private anymore. They buried the truth. I'm digging it up file by file. Sunlight poured through the curtains of Madison's apartment, warm and bright. But the room felt more like a war room than a sanctuary. Her small living room wall was now plastered with papers, each one pinned with colored tacks. Emails, account statements, photos from her childhood annotated in red ink. In the center was a printed timeline, a winding path of betrayal. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, his laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. Anonymous account set, he said. Multiple email layers, no one can trace it to you. Madison nodded, barely hearing him. She was categorizing the documents into 3 piles: financial fraud, emotional abuse, and asset misappropriation. It wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about years, a legacy of quiet theft. The printer whirred behind her, spitting out the scanned transcript of a voicemail. Valerie's voice hissing through the static. If you won't give it willingly, we'll just take it. Madison clipped it under emotional abuse. Her phone lit up. Andrea on the line. Everything's backed up, Madison reported. Offline and in cloud. Andrea's voice was sharp but calm. Good, but don't release anything yet. When you post, make sure it hits like a bomb. Irrefutable. Timed. Think of it as narrative warfare. Madison closed her eyes. She remembered Valerie's words, remembered that group chat, that birth certificate. They want a war? She whispered. Let's give them a public reckoning. Ethan handed her a small USB. Encrypted copy, keep it off-site. She nodded and slipped it into a metal box under the couch. Turning back to the wall, she reached for a red marker and circled one date on the printed court schedule. April 23rd, Tyler's official summons. Underneath, in bold black letters, she wrote by hand. Start the avalanche. They always smile for the camera, but a smile can't hold under pressure. The envelope came without ceremony. No bold red stamps, no thunderous arrival. Just a plain cream-colored envelope marked Internal Revenue Service. Douglas Carter tore it open at the breakfast table with marmalade still on his fingers. He froze mid-bite. Across the table, Victoria sipped her tea, unaware. I'm meeting the girls for brunch. We're discussing the gala theme. We're being audited, Douglas said flatly. The room went quiet except for the slow tick of the clock on the wall. What? Douglas pushed the letter across the table. Personal audit. Income discrepancies from the past 5 years. They want everything. Victoria blinked, then blinked again. That's impossible. We have an accountant. They think we're hiding income. He stood up, already reaching for his phone. This is a mistake. They need clarification, that's all. But Victoria's face was pale. Did you... She swallowed. Did you hide anything? Douglas didn't answer. At the luncheon that afternoon, Victoria wore her best pearls and a pastel dress, but she could feel it. The eyes. The way the other wives paused just a second too long before greeting her. Whispers behind manicured hands. So sorry to hear about your little mix-up, one said, offering a saccharine smile. The IRS can be so unfeeling. Victoria smiled too, like porcelain, fragile. She excused herself early, claiming a headache, and sat in her car, scrolling through her Instagram. Every post that flaunted wealth, dinners, handbags, vacations, now felt like evidence. Her thumb hovered over each one before pressing delete. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment miles away, Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, Jasmine beside her. The news played in the background. Nothing yet. But her inbox pinged. Subject: confirmation of return receipt. IRS evidence package logged. Emily smiled. First domino, she whispered. Back at the Carter home, Victoria waited for Douglas in the study. He arrived late, sleeves rolled, a bottle of wine in hand. Is there anything you haven't told me? She asked quietly. Douglas didn't meet her eyes. He poured the wine with a shaking hand and murmured, Everything is still in your hands. Some deliveries are heavier than others. This one carried a reckoning. Tyler breezed through the sliding glass doors of his office building like any other Monday. Caffeine in hand, tie slightly loosened, he threw a wink at the receptionist and tapped his badge against the security gate. But halfway to his cubicle, a man in a navy windbreaker stepped into his path. Tyler Linwood? Yeah? The man handed over a sealed envelope. You've been served. Have a good day. Tyler blinked. Wait, what? But the man was already walking away. He turned the envelope over in his hands, a nervous chuckle rising. Probably just some billing error, he muttered to a passing coworker, trying to look unbothered. At his desk, he slid it open with a letter opener. One glance. 2 words jumped out. Identity abuse, civil claim. His stomach flipped. He read further, dates, account numbers, names. His name, Madison's name. His mouth dried. He fumbled for his phone and called Valerie. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He slammed the phone down. The office buzzed with indifferent noise, but his head filled with static. People were laughing nearby. How could they be laughing? By noon, he was at Valerie's door, hands shaking, papers still clutched in his fingers. She opened the door in a robe, face pale, mascara smudged. I need help. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in his hand. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back inside. On the dining table, shredded paper littered the surface like snow. Bits of bank statements, old letters, a photo of Madison as a child, torn straight through the middle. Valerie's voice was low and hoarse. Mom has cleaned up too much for you. Tyler stared at her. You're the one who said... She slammed a drawer shut. Don't say my name in court. Later, alone in his car, Tyler flipped back through the summons. On the last page, under witness list, he saw it. Chloe R. His breath hitched. The girl Madison always kept close, the one who never liked him. This wasn't just a scare tactic. This was real. You know who your real friends are when your name trends for the wrong reasons. The clock read 12:07 a.m. The apartment was dark, save for the pale blue glow of the laptop screen. Madison sat in her desk chair, shoulders squared, fingers hovering over the post button. Ethan sat on the couch behind her, laptop open, ready to track the reach. Chloe had sent a last message before going to sleep. Whatever happens, I've got your back. Madison took a breath, then typed, They said I was selfish. Here's what they never told you. She attached the files one by one. A screenshot of Tyler's credit card application using her name, the voicemail from Valerie threatening to take her property, the scholarship account withdrawal history signed by Stephen. No commentary, no embellishment. Just facts. Then she hit post. They waited in silence. Within 30 minutes, the post had 200 shares. By morning, it was over 10,000. Strangers were stitching together threads of abuse, betrayal, legal traps. Some cried in the comments. Others were furious. A few trolls emerged, but were drowned out by overwhelming support. Hashtags trended. Family fraud, A2 justice for Madison. Not just selfish. Across town, Valerie woke to notifications she didn't understand. Her name tagged, her image pulled from old family photos, spliced into split-screen before and after posts. She picked up the phone and dialed a journalist contact. "She's twisting everything. I demand a correction." But the article that came out 2 hours later was worse. Daughter exposes family's financial abuse, with receipts. The journalist had sourced everything from Madison's public post. At noon, Madison's inbox pinged. "Independent Journalist 77. I followed your story. I'd like to help you tell it properly, with care and reach. People need to hear it from you." She stared at the message, lips pressed together. Then she typed back slowly. "Maybe it's time." They built a fortress of lies, but fire eats wood, not stone. The Carter house used to echo with the soft clicks of heels on marble, champagne glasses chiming at dinner parties, the hum of rehearsed laughter. Now it echoed with silence and the occasional thud, like the one made when Douglas slammed the door after his IRS meeting. He didn't speak. Just walked past Valerie, past the framed family photos now tilted on the hallway table, and into his study. She followed. "What did they say?" He poured a drink instead of answering. "Douglas. They want everything." He turned, eyes bloodshot. Bank statements, tax returns, even Madison's transfer files, because someone thought it was smart to shuffle property between siblings without reporting it. Valerie swallowed hard. It was a family adjustment, a misunderstanding. "No," he cut her off. "It was a lie, and now it's public." At that moment, her phone buzzed. Subject: termination of PR sponsorship. Effective immediately. She sank into the armchair. The community program she'd spent years curating, gone. Just like that. Downstairs, Tyler paced the kitchen. "Mom, fix this," he said for the 5th time. "Talk to someone. Call the paper. You always know someone." But Valerie laughed. A dry, cracked sound. "They're not picking up anymore, Tyler. No one wants to touch us." He stared at her. "So that's it?" She turned to him, mascara smudged, lips trembling. "I cleaned up your messes for years, stole for you, lied for you. You think I can fix this?" In the silence that followed, Douglas stormed back in. He threw his phone on the dining table, its screen still glowing with a news headline. "Whistleblower daughter uncovers decade of familial fraud. Civil trial begins." "All of this," he said through clenched teeth, "because we didn't want to lose an apartment?" Upstairs, Valerie stood in front of her vanity mirror. Behind her, the muted television played a courtroom feed. Madison, calm and steady, answering questions. Their daughter, the one they had underestimated. Valerie locked eyes with Madison's reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, she couldn't look away. The courtroom was cold, but truth carries its own warmth. The wooden bench creaked beneath Madison as she sat, hands folded, eyes steady on the judge. The civil courtroom was simple. No theatrics, no drama. Just truth, and the people afraid of it. Andrea stood tall beside her. "Ready?" she whispered. Madison nodded. Across the room, Valerie sat stiffly in a beige blazer too crisp for the moment. Tyler slouched beside her, avoiding eye contact, pretending to read the documents in front of him. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. The judge entered, gavel tapping once. "Court is in session." Andrea stood. "Your Honor, today we present not just documents, but patterns, a long history of financial coercion under the guise of family." She turned to Madison. "Please tell the court what happened in your own words." Madison rose, walked slowly to the witness stand, and took a breath. "It started when I was 18, she began, voice clear. "I had a scholarship to Yale, a dream. But that year, my father withdrew $15,000 from my account, money meant for my education, and gave it to my brother." She paused, locking eyes with Valerie. "After that, it never stopped. I signed papers I didn't understand. I gave up my car. My apartment was next. Every time I hesitated, I was reminded what I owed for being born. The judge listened in silence. The room was still. And then I discovered a credit card I never opened, used at casinos, for watches, electronics. Tyler's name was on the receipts. My name was on the bills. Tyler shifted in his seat. Valerie's jaw was tight, but she said nothing. I didn't want revenge, Madison continued. I just wanted my name back. My dignity. My future Andrea gave a small nod. There were no tears, no raised voices, just the weight of fact. The opposing lawyer didn't even cross-examine. There wasn't much left to say. The judge looked at everyone, then tapped the gavel once. This court will reconvene next week for final decision. As the sound echoed, Madison turned to step down. From the audience, Chloe smiled, proud, steady, and for the first time in years, Madison felt warm. Not from forgiveness, but from truth finally being spoken aloud. They expected silence. What they got was record-breaking clarity. The courtroom brimmed with tension. Elbows close, breaths held, eyes locked on the judge's bench. Reporters filled the back rows, notepads ready, cameras restricted but always watching. Madison sat still, chin high, Andrea beside her in sharp navy. A microphone stood between them and resolution. Across the aisle, Valerie looked like a statue carved in regret. Douglas's arms were crossed, face unreadable. Tyler picked at a hangnail, as if that would make this moment disappear. The judge cleared his throat and began to read. This court finds the defendant, Tyler Carter, responsible for identity theft and fraudulent financial activity totaling $75,000. A collective rustle swept through the gallery. Cameras didn't flash, but pens scratched faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court recommends a referral to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution, pending the plaintiff's decision. Andrea's hand barely touched Madison's. A silent question. Madison stood. She turned not to the judge, but to her family. I won't press charges, she said, her voice steady, amplified by the mic. But I won't protect you either. That's over. Valerie's face crumpled, shock collapsing into humiliation. Her mascara smudged instantly, but she didn't move to wipe it. The tears came all at once, heavy and gasping. The gallery froze. This was the first public crack in the Queen's mask. Douglas avoided her eyes. Tyler just stared ahead, already somewhere else in his mind. Outside the courtroom, the air smelled of sweat, ink, and fresh headlines. Madison stepped down the stone steps, flanked by Andrea and Chloe. The wind tugged at her coat, but she stood tall. From the crowd, a voice called her name. It was the journalist, the one who had reached out weeks before. She walked up slowly, eyes soft but direct. Now, she said, holding up a recorder. Will you let the world hear the full story? Madison looked into the crowd of faces. Maybe it's time, she replied without flinching. You don't need to burn bridges when they're already crumbling. The bus rattled forward under the gray Boston sky. Madison sat in the back row, the hum of the engine blending with the distant murmur of passengers. Her hood was up, not to hide, just to hold the quiet a little longer. Out the window, the streets blurred, familiar but no longer suffocating. Her phone buzzed once. Ethan. She picked it up, pressing it gently to her ear. Tyler's bank records are under full investigation, he said. There's chatter. They might turn on each other to survive. Madison didn't respond. They're spiraling, Mads. You could go public again. Take control of the narrative. She stared ahead, letting the silence grow. I already did, she said. Just not the way they expected. The call ended. She tucked the phone into her coat and stepped off the bus. The community center sat on the corner like it always had. Peeling paint, flyers layered thick on the walls. Inside, the air smelled like old books and cheap coffee. A single mother sat at the table by the window, holding Elise in one hand, worry etched in her eyebrows. Is someone helping you? Madison asked. The woman shook her head. I don't really get this stuff. They said it's standard, but there's a clause. Madison slid into the seat beside her. Show me. They spent 20 minutes going line by line. Madison didn't say who she was. She didn't need to. The woman smiled, touched her hand once, and said, You should teach this stuff. Madison smiled back quietly. Later that night, she sat at the counter in her apartment, tea growing cold beside her. The television flickered. Low volume, but the captions rolled on. Valerie Carter officially removed from all community and charitable boards. A spokesperson stated, No one is above consequences, even behind perfect smiles. There was no anger in her chest, just a strange stillness, like an old storm finally passing. The group chat Valerie had once created to shame her was now silent. No pings, no rage, just a ghost town of names and unread messages. Madison pulled out her notebook, the same one that held her plans, her fears, and the pieces of herself she wasn't willing to lose again. She wrote carefully, I don't need them to fall. I just needed to rise. Then she closed the cover. They said I was a mistake. Turns out I was a mirror. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of a chair. It wasn't large. Maybe 30 folding seats arranged in neat rows, a whiteboard at the front with a handwritten sign, Transparent Futures, Real Talk Series. Madison stood behind a simple lectern, no microphone needed. Her voice carried on clarity alone. I used to think invisibility was the worst thing, she began, scanning the small crowd. But sometimes it's protection, and sometimes it becomes power. A few heads nodded. Chloe, in the front row, leaned forward slightly. Not commanding attention anymore, but present, supportive. Lena sat 2 rows back, flanked by Ethan and a handful of high school students with notebooks in their laps and questions in their eyes. Madison smiled gently. I come from a family that smiled a lot, publicly, but there were a lot of contracts behind those smiles, papers to sign, names to erase. She paused. But you're not defined by what they steal from you. You're defined by what you choose to keep. A girl in the second row wiped her nose on her sleeve, eyes red-rimmed. A boy near the back started scribbling. After the session, a young student, no older than 17, raised her hand. Are you still mad at them? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Madison didn't flinch. She'd thought about that question for years, in every form. Her answer now came easy. I'm not mad at them anymore. I just won't let them write me back. Silence followed. Then a wave of quiet breath, as if the whole room exhaled at once. Outside, the sun hung low, catching the edges of the dusty library windows. As the audience began to file out, a girl with a messy braid lingered. She opened her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote quickly before tearing it out and pressing it into Madison's hand. The note read, You helped me see I'm not crazy. Thank you, Madison folded the paper slowly, placed it inside her bag, and turned toward the window. Her reflection looking back not as a mistake, but as a beginning. They called her ungrateful, a mistake, even a traitor to her own blood. But in the end, she didn't need revenge. She only needed the truth to speak louder than their silence. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs quietly, stamps officially, and waits patiently for the world to listen. Like a verdict long delayed, fairness may come late, but it never arrives empty. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to bow for a family's legacy of silence to collapse. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story,